It begins as a whisper drawn across the sky, a line so clean it slices through our predictions and leaves them bleeding light, a trajectory that seems at first like happenstance, until the numbers harden, the uncertainties shrink, and the curve reveals its origin in a colder geometry, not from here but from that wide republic of stars beyond our walls of ice and radio and denial. We point our instruments, ignite the math, and the sky knits itself into certainty. A body on a hyperbolic path, past, future bound, entering the solar wind like a swimmer slipping into tide at night, unannounced, relentless, tracing an arc that only interstellar strangers can sustain. We do what we always do when the cosmos sends a riddle. We take the faintness and smear it into meaning, stacking photons over nights until the signal stands. Brightness rises and falls with the clockwork pulse of rotation, but the cadence is too tidy. The specular glints too knife-edged, as if a facet somewhere is machined, not weathered, as if the object knows where our eyes are. Nothing in those first measurements screams machine, nothing in the light curve writes the word directly. But somewhere between the 5th and the 50th fit to the data, you begin to feel a presence of intention, like hearing meter in a language you do not speak. The first coordinates roll across observatory chat rooms like thunder at the edge of town. You can hear the old arguments rising, comet, shard, fragment, fluff. You can hear the new ones walking in, polite at first, then braver as the fit refuses to bend. And running under it all is a hush of recognition, the same hush that followed the first interstellar visitor, the second, and will follow the 1,000th. The universe is not sterile, and our region of it is not exempt from the traffic of the deep. They named it 3i Atlas because our catalogs need order, our memories need keys, and our storytellers need a place to begin. But the object itself carries a name written in motion, an identity composed of arrival time, approach vector, and a speed steeped in other suns. The inbound velocity speaks in kilometers per second. The inclination is an accent none of our planets share. The eccentricity shrugs off the sun's leash with a number larger than 1. To most observers, it is only a point, a scratch in the detector that becomes a dot that becomes a trail. And yet, in that trail is an epic. Dust between stars, frozen nights lasting millennia, the quiet hum of radiation spattering a skin hardened against nothingness. Even if it is nothing more than nature, it is nature distilled to a harsh elegance. Even if it is merely a shard of the in-between, it is a shard flung by processes we are still learning to name. And if it is more, if somewhere along that polished dimness there are surfaces chosen rather than inherited, angles selected by minds that learn to argue with drag and sunfire, then the significance of the discovery will not be confined to instrument logs. We will have met not a neighbor, not an ambassador, but a witness. Something that has seen highways we have only drawn in speculation, something that remembers in its very mass and strategy the economies of a civilization we do not yet possess. That is why 3i Atlas holds us, because it is either a poem written by geology under alien skies or a sentence composed by intelligence that speaks in delta V, and either way, we are reading ourselves in it. The first nights belong to the observers, the patient gathering of light, the calibration rituals, the removal of bias like dust brushed from a fossil. Photometry yields a light curve, a rise, a fall, a rise again, the signature of rotation. But the amplitude is strange, the color indices flatter than any handful of dirty ice should allow. Spectrographs taste for gas and find little to savor. Cometary lines that ought to shout are barely whispers. Models are drafted, a tumbling shard, elongated with a surface that drinks sunlight rather than gleaming, unless occasionally it flashes, as if a panel has swung into alignment with the sun, a heliographic moment that needles our curiosity. Radar is too ambitious at this range. We lean harder into reflected light, build albedos like paper lanterns around darkness, and measure the tiny soft forces that complicate orbits, the pressure of sunlight, the fizz of escaping volatiles, the tug of thermal re-radiation. Then comes the surprise that clarifies and confounds in equal measure, a persistent non-gravitational acceleration, small but stubborn, pointing not where outgassing plumes would typically push, but aligning more closely with faces the light curve suggests are broad and planar. In the math, it's a deviation. In the imagination, it's a hand steadying a keel. Spectral absorption lines stay muted, implying surfaces dusted or coated to be indifferent to color, the opposite of the dirty snowball our textbooks once taught. The error bars are honest, the fits are humble, the data are thin, and yet a pattern emerges as surely as a coastline from fog. Whatever 3i Atlas is, it is unlike the comets that bleed their identity into every observation. It is unlike the asteroids that glitter and shadow with familiar stubbornness. It is its own grammar, and within that grammar is the sense of design, not proven, not declared, but haunting the edges of probability like a silhouette at the edge of campfire light. Natural objects misbehave all the time. The universe does not owe us neatness, yet this misbehavior has manners. The non-gravitational acceleration refuses to map cleanly to sublimation jets. Even with tricks of geometry and spin, you can invoke exotic porosities and claim low densities bordering on absurd, but then you must explain the sharp glints, the consistent cadence. You can declare it a fractal of fluff pushed by sunlight, a dandelion seed in the solar breeze, but then you must live with a thermal model that refuses comfort. Meanwhile, the light curve hums. The highlights come and go as if facets winked at us on a schedule. The phase angle dependency of brightness suggests surfaces that prefer not to scatter back at our telescopes. The anomaly persists after perihelion, when outgassing would surge if there were ices to boil. One might expect tongues of gas to produce a messy thrust vector, a torque that would wander. Instead, the push remains calm, almost architectural. Simulations of solar radiation pressure on thin, low-mass sheets begin to fit better than any frostbitten comet can manage. The object's rotational state evolves, but it does so like a craft whose moments of inertia were designed rather than assigned by accident and impact. None of this proves guidance. All of this invites it as a hypothesis. And as the trajectory threads gravitational contours with a grace that extracts energy without sacrificing stability, one begins to feel in one's bones the quiet of navigation, of a path chosen to minimize hazard rather than maximize spectacle. 1,000 cautions bloom. Beware selection effects. Beware wishful thinking dressed as inference. Beware the old hunger for company wearing a new lab coat. But hunger or not, the data does not blink. We are left with a puzzle that does not degrade when touched. It grows sharper. Speculation is not a crime. It is the unpaid intern of discovery. So the hypotheses arrive. A natural relic from a shredded planetary system, its matrix tightened by eons of radiation sintering. A skeletal shard from the crust of a super-Earth, polished by interstellar dust until it is as featureless as a monk's bowl. A compacted ultra-porous aggregate, feather light, driven by sunlight rather than chemistry. A solar sail fragment, a messenger husk, a courier with its payload spent but its chassis intact. A probe designed not to communicate, but to sense, then glide, then pass. Those who favor the natural reach for Occam, though they must stretch his razor across unfamiliar densities and improbable strengths. Those who favor the artificial taste for parsimony of a different key and a large area-to-mass ratio, a muted spectrum, a thrust aligned with the sun, a geometry that sometimes cruelly behaves like a panel. If you are cautious, you sit on the fence and watch the weather. Neither hypothesis collapses. Both can be tuned, and our data are too sparse to music a verdict. If you are bold, you propose a constellation of relics from elsewhere has been sliding through our system, unseen, for eons, and only now have our machines learned to catch their faint footsteps. And in that bolder mood, you suggest that 3i Atlas is the first we notice that behaves as if it noticed us back. If such a thing were true, the consequences would not be fireworks, but policy, not screams, but budgets, not sermons, but architecture. Because a messenger that does not knock is not here to parley. It is here to measure, and anything that measures learns, and anything that learns decides where to go next. Coincidences are the universe's sense of humor, but sometimes the timing goes beyond a practical joke. 3I Atlas slipped through perihelion during a period when solar weather frothed. Coronal holes gaped like mouths, magnetic loops sang, the wind turned gusty, and the light spiked. At the same time, Earth and Sun drew into a geometry that placed our best observatories on the right side of night at the right hours to catch the faintest brightening. Even the great planets sketched their slow, stately arcs into positions that offered gentle gravitational whiffs, the kind a careful navigator could sip without risking turbulence. To call this appointment would be to overstate certainty. To call it purely luck would be to ignore that luck has a habit of preferring the prepared. It brushed regions crowded with assets, telescopes awake, deep space antennas attentive, a civilization primed by prior interstellar visitors to look up with fewer biases. Our alarm bells were tuned, and they rang. In the afterglow of detection, analyses of correlated phenomena pop like grains in a hot pan, a subtle transient in the radio background coincident in time with an observed brightness change, likely nothing but intriguing, a soft rearrangement in the spin phase that aligns with a gust of solar wind, a brief, tantalizing reduction in the amplitude of the light curve just as the object threaded a corridor of observing baselines that minimize parallax errors. Each of these by itself is noise. Together they form a tissue of plausibility that something more than tide and heat is at work. Probability calculations are thrown into rooms where statisticians breathe them hot and cool them with skepticism. In the end, a responsible posture remains. Coincidences accumulate but do not coerce. Yet they alter posture. They nudge a civilization toward readiness. Gravity is the great composer of motion, and 3I Atlas dances to its score with the kind of competence that embarrasses our metaphors. The sun draws the path into a curve that will never close. Jupiter hums in bass, a distant threat and a possible ally. The lesser planets contribute ornaments of pull that can be tapped or do. We map the track with numerical integrators until it becomes more than a line. It becomes a set of options. A natural fragment blunders through these options with indifference. A guided body might treat them like instruments to play. The trajectory, as reconstructed, suggests energy exchanges that are subtle, shy of the reckless dives of comets that court fate and disintegration. Instead, there are grazings of potential wells that give small boosts, a throbbing of velocity that reads like someone, something, prefers safety margins. We run Monte Carlo ensembles like weather forecasts for fate, and in a significant fraction, 3I Atlas leaves us as cleanly as it came, losing only the heat it stole, conceding only the photons it could not refuse. But in some, tantalizing, it steals a touch more energy than we expect for its cross-section and presumed mass, as if the configuration of its face to the sun is not incidental but chosen. Turn a panel here, twist a hull there, harvest momentum from pressure like a leaf turning to breeze. Orbital dynamics becomes autobiography. The choices inscribed in path reveal a temperament. We, who have just learned to whisper between planets with ion drives, watch an object that might be doing in silence what we are learning to do in laboratory hum. Whether natural or artifice, its flight writes a lesson on our chalkboard. Pathfinding is an art that grows out of physics, like music from strings. And then the sky closes. Solar conjunction drags 3I Atlas into the furnace-bright hinterlands where our instruments squint and fail, where antenna dishes sway across a flame-drowned silence. For 3 days, 72 hours of coffee and worry, the signal-to-noise bottoms out and our estimates turn predictive. In absence, paranoia flourishes. What if it changes course? What if it brightens in ways we cannot see? What if it communicates in frequencies we are too busy to monitor? Engineers do what they can. Side lobes are tested. Ancillary instruments are woken. Noise models are scoured. Astronomers recite caution. Conjunctions blind us all the time. Don't baptize a glitch as a sacrament. Still, the absence gnaws because it comes at a hinge moment, inbound turning outbound, heated turning cooling, a time when comets, spasm, and artifacts, if artifact it is, might execute a planned maneuver. When the glare finally relinquishes, when the sun's rim slides past and the black returns, 3i Atlas is there, but altered. The spin phase appears to have precessed slightly. The cadence of specular flashes is different, now less frequent, but sharper when they strike. The amplitude of the light curve has narrowed as if some surfaces are now less cooperative. It could be thermal stress, the cracking of a skin, the stuttering of a brittle object trimmed by heat. It could be the act of a craft changing how it shows itself to sunlight. We write both sentences in the same paper because our ethics demand honesty about ambiguity. Yet, around lab benches and in late-night calls, we entertain the movie playing in our heads. The blackout as a curtain, the reappearance as a new scene. Somewhere under that indifferent geometry, a decision had been executed. Sir, and we were not invited to witness the button press. The question of what it means is not academic, it is architectural. If 3i Atlas is a natural lesson written in a brutal script, it teaches us that interstellar debris can masquerade as machinery, that radiation-hard skins and high area-to-mass ratios evolve in the wild, that the physics of sunlight is a tool even for rocks. That alone reshapes mission design, sails thinner than silk, structures tuned to dance in photon weather, trajectories that borrow from comet craft. But if 3i Atlas is artifice, the implication lands like a quiet detonation in the center of our culture. It means we are party to a practice older than our rockets, the dispatch of uncrewed scouts that do not care to converse, that prefer to pass, to measure, to move on. It means propulsion schemes we barely pilot in prototypes are common enough elsewhere to be unremarkable. It means navigation that treats entire solar systems as air to glide through. It means autonomy measured in light years, not minutes of uplink. It means that the first proof of extraterrestrial industry we encounter may not be a broadcast joyfully wasting energy into the dark, but a discipline of silence optimized for survival, for endurance, for the extraction of knowledge without footprint. Faced with such a model, we would revise our fantasies. We would prioritize the quiet instruments, the cold demons that sleep for centuries, then open eyes like apertures, sip starshine for attitude control, steer by stately tilts. Our economy of exploration would pivot, build more watchers at the heliopause, more sentinels in polar orbit to catch the faint and fleeing, redirect resources into intercept architectures that can sprint, sniff, and pace without needing an invitation. We would teach ourselves to listen not for messages, but for behaviors. As the object recedes and our grasp on its subtleties loosens, the debate ripens rather than rots. Papers proliferate, some meticulously natural, hemming the observed acceleration with novel models of thermal recoil, others intrigued by the engineering likeness of the data, sketching designs on the back of cosmic napkins, hollow structures, metamaterial skins, a fractal lattice that survives interstellar sandblasting, the kind of architecture that would leave little in the way of spectral identity, but much in the way of dynamical signature. The philosophical edge sharpens too. If we normalize the concept of silent visiting machines, our definition of contact changes from conversation to evidence, from dialogue to inference. We begin to inventory not words, but footprints, not greetings, but trajectories. The Drake equation sprouts a new term not often dwelled upon, the fraction of civilizations that deploy uncrewed scouts at scale and the share of their budgets that go to communication versus reconnaissance. Perhaps we are embarrassingly anthropocentric in thinking someone would shout across the void when whispering serves better. Perhaps the universe is not full of parties, but full of fieldwork. And if that is so, our feelings will matter less than our competence. We will be graded not on our poetry, but on our ability to intercept, to follow, to analyze, to build our own quiet things. There is a humbling beauty in that. The cosmos as a laboratory where the syllabus is written by motion, and we earn our marks in math. In practical rooms where mission planners count grams like gold, 3i Atlas is a prod. New roadmaps appear on whiteboards, rapid response interceptors sleeping at the Sun-Earth Lagrange points, warmed and ready to burn at a day's notice. A scout class of spacecraft built around photon sail kinematics, able to yaw and trim like birds. A net of optical and infrared sentries at the cold edges of the system, watching for the next trespasser. We debate laser beaming architectures that could, in principle, push our own sails swiftly enough to pace an interstellar vagabond for a precious week. We sketch compact spectrographs and dust collectors that can be delivered by shoebox craft. We price out autonomy algorithms that can decide trajectories with minimal ground in the loop. And we talk, in hushed but giddy tones, about an even bolder thing, a picket line just inside the heliopause, a string of craft far from any planetary interference, triangulating the inbound faintness before it is even a rumor in the inner system. Even if 3i Atlas proves natural, these tools will not be wasted. They will study comets, test sails, refine guidance. If it proves artificial, they will be the first handshake, not with a mind, but with a method. Policy will follow technology like tide follows moon. Protocols for non-contact contact will be drafted. Ethics committees will expand to include celestial mechanics experts. A new branch of law will grow where planetary protection crosses the right to observe. We will learn to be discreet. We will practice silence. In the end, the night remains what it has always been, immeasurable and intimate, crowded with light from things that died before our languages learned tense. 3i Atlas will leave us, has perhaps by the time you hear this already left us, taking with it the specifics we crave and leaving us the hunger we need. But the future has been nudged. The next visitors will not find us unready. Somewhere in a clean room right now, a sail is being folded like an origami swan that will never breathe air. Somewhere in a conference room, a budget line is shifting, a priority reweighted toward quiet speed. Somewhere in the mind of a child, a picture is forming of a ship that moves by turning its skin to sunlight and letting pressure right its path. This is our inheritance from a dot that would not obey. We will pursue, not because we want to conquer, but because following is a form of listening, and listening is how civilizations avoid repeating themselves. The cosmos is so much bigger than our arguments about what counts as life, what counts as intelligence. It is made of behaviors and consequences of physics played like music by everything that exists. If there are others, if the galaxy hums with machines whose designers sleep under alien constellations. Then we have just joined a conversation. They began with tides and torque and the discipline of not being seen. The next century of exploration will be shaped by that intuition that wonder and rigor are not enemies, that the ecstatic and the precise can occupy the same breath, that when a messenger passes without pausing, the respectful reply is to become capable of keeping up. And as we learn to keep up, as we train our craft and our minds to the art of gliding through gravity and harvesting photons for attitude and grace, we will discover something our philosophers have always suspected, that to chase a thing across the dark is to discover who you are. The stars do not owe us answers, but they reward attention. 3i Atlas, in its aloofness, has paid us the compliment of being worth our best attention. We will return that compliment with a future measured not in slogans but in trajectories. We will write our answer in motion,